the number 6 most feared tackler of all time, Jack Tatum.
The assassin, Jack Tatum.
He's only number 6?
He should be number 1.
Number 6 on your list as feared, number 1 as most dangerous.
He was accused of being a dirty player, a headhunter, a cold-blooded enforcer, and the man who turned a game of inches into a game of hospital visits. Jack Tatum was terrifying. He didn't just break tackles, he broke wills. He ended a rising star's career with a single hit in a meaningless preseason game, leaving a man paralyzed for life. But he was also a 3-time Pro Bowler, a national champion, and a Super Bowl winner who defined the most feared secondary in the history of the sport. So, how does such a destructive player become the heartbeat of a championship dynasty, and why were coaches and fans willing to celebrate a level of violence that bordered on the felonious? To answer that, we need to go back to his roots in 1968. Powered by the most intense coaching staff in college football, the Ohio State Buckeyes were a juggernaut. They were coming off a season where they looked unbeatable, but they needed a defensive spark to reach the next level. In the 1968 draft of talent, the most impactful addition was a rover named Jack Tatum. In his very first season, he showed the world what it meant to play defense with a predatory mindset. Under the legendary Woody Hayes, Tatum learned that to survive and dominate, you had to bring a level of intensity that made the opponent fear for their safety. Tatum always had a dark edge to him. At Ohio State, he wasn't just a defensive back. He was a weapon. He hit so hard that even his own teammates stayed out of his way in practice. Who's the NFL's greatest enforcer of all time? That's a tough call. Who's the most feared? That's easy. Safety Jack Tatum. Soon he had a reputation. Clinical, explosive, and unapologetic. But he was also a difference maker. He took that intensity to the Oakland Raiders in 1971, and the league was never the same. He became the poster child for the Soul Patrol, a man who played in a gray area of the rules until the rules themselves had to be rewritten to stop him. Was he a product of his time, or did he go too far? To understand the man they called the assassin, we have to look at the blood, the silver, and the black. To uncover the professional violence of Jack Tatum, you have to look at the soil he grew up in. Born in Cherryville, North Carolina, and raised in Passaic, New Jersey, Tatum didn't start as a defender. He was a star running back. But when he arrived at Ohio State in 1967, Woody Hayes saw something different. He saw a man who enjoyed the collision more than the touchdown. Hayes moved him to the rover position, a hybrid of linebacker and safety. It was a role designed for a player with high-level football IQ and a low-level regard for human safety. In 1968, as a sophomore, Tatum was the catalyst for a Buckeyes team that went 10-0 and won the national championship after a 27-16 victory over USC in the Rose Bowl. For the fans of that era, Tatum was a revelation. He was a 2-time unanimous All-American in 1969 and 1970. He was so dominant that he finished in the top 10 of the Heisman Trophy voting as a defensive player. But even then, the controversy followed him. He didn't just tackle players, he tried to erase them. By the time the 1971 NFL draft arrived, the Oakland Raiders were looking for an identity. They were a team of misfits led by the maverick Al Davis. Davis didn't want a nice secondary. He wanted a group of outlaws who would intimidate the high-flying passing games of the AFC. With the 19th overall pick, the Raiders selected Tatum. When Tatum walked into the Raiders' locker room in 1971, he found a culture that mirrored his own soul. John Madden was the young, energetic coach, but Al Davis was the architect. Davis's philosophy was simple: the vertical game. On offense, you throw it deep. On defense, you make sure the other team is too scared to throw it deep. Tatum joined a secondary that was already building a reputation for unnecessary roughness. You had Willie Brown, the Hall of Fame technician who lured quarterbacks into traps. You had George Atkinson, who was essentially a heat-seeking missile at the other safety spot, and then you had Jack. Tatum was the closer. In the 1970s, the NFL was the Wild West. This was the era of the bump and run, where defenders could manhandle receivers all the way down the field. There were no defenseless receiver protections. If a quarterback like Terry Bradshaw or Bob Grease threw a ball into the middle of the field, it was considered an act of negligence. Tatum was the bill collector. The NFL in the 70s was a shark tank. You had the Steel Curtain in Pittsburgh, the Purple People Eaters in Minnesota, and the Doomsday Defense in Dallas. But the Raiders' defense had a specific kind of edge. They were dirty before the league knew how to define the word. Tatum and Atkinson were the twin engines of this intimidation machine. For the fans in Oakland, this was exactly what they paid to see. We have to talk about December 23, 1972, Three Rivers Stadium, the Immaculate Reception. Every NFL fan knows the ending, Franco Harris scooping the ball off the turf and sprinting for a touchdown. But if you look at the beginning of that play, you see Jack Tatum. It was 4th and 10. Terry Bradshaw scrambled and fired a desperation pass to Frenchie Fuqua. Tatum, reading the play perfectly, closed the gap with terrifying speed. He didn't play the ball. He played the man. He leveled Fuqua at the exact moment the ball arrived. The collision was so massive that the ball didn't just fall, it ricocheted 10 yards back toward Franco Harris. To this day, Raiders fans will tell you that the ball hit Fuqua, which, by the rules of the time, should have made the catch illegal. But the officials called it a touchdown. Tatum was furious. He felt he had done his job perfectly. He had separated the man from the ball, but he was robbed by a miracle. That loss fueled a decade of resentment and intensity that would eventually lead the Raiders to the promised land. That journey peaked in 1976. The Raiders were the best team in football, finishing 13-1 in the regular season. They finally exercised their demons against the Steelers in the AFC Championship game and headed to Super Bowl XI to face the Minnesota Vikings. This was the game where Jack Tatum's legend was cemented. Late in the fourth quarter, Vikings receiver Sammy White caught a pass over the middle. He didn't see Tatum coming. Nobody ever did. Tatum delivered a hit that looked like a bomb going off. Sammy White's helmet, with the chin strap still buckled, flew 10 yards down the field. White was out before his body touched the grass. It remains the most famous hit in Super Bowl history. The Raiders won 32-14. Madden got his ring. Stabler got his ring. And Jack Tatum proved that you could win a championship with a defense that played on the edge of catastrophe. For the fans watching at home, this was the pinnacle of the sport. It was tough, it was mean, and it was unapologetic. But as we all know, when you play that close to the edge, eventually someone is going to fall off. This is the part of the story that every veteran NFL fan remembers where they were when they heard the news. It was a preseason game. Oakland versus New England. In the grand scheme of things, the game didn't matter. But for Jack Tatum, there was no such thing as a meaningless game. Darryl Stingley was a rising star for the Patriots. He was fast, he was talented, and he was the future of their offense. During a play in the second quarter, Stingley ran a slant route. The pass from Steve Grogan was high and behind him. Stingley reached back, his body completely exposed, his head tilted back to track the ball. Tatum saw the opening. He didn't lead with his head. It wasn't a spear, but he delivered a shoulder-first blow to Stingley's chest and neck area. It was a collision that occurred thousands of times in NFL history. But this time, something was wrong. Stingley didn't bounce back up. He didn't reach for his helmet. He just lay there, perfectly still. The diagnosis was devastating. 2 broken vertebrae. Darryl Stingley was a quadriplegic. At 26 years old, his life as he knew it was over. The fallout from this hit changed the NFL forever. The media, which had once celebrated Tatum's assassin persona, suddenly found it repulsive. The league began to implement Stingley Rules to protect receivers, but the most controversial part of the story isn't the hit itself. It was what happened next. Jack Tatum never apologized.
Did you ever apologize to Darryl Stingley?
No, I didn't. I apologize because Darryl got hurt, and I'm sorry he got hurt, but I will never apologize for the way I played football.
In his mind, he was doing exactly what he was paid to do. He was playing within the rules of 1978. He argued that if he started apologizing for hits, he couldn't play the game with the intensity required to be Jack Tatum. For the next 29 years, until Stingley's death in 2007, the two men never reconciled. Tatum even tried to visit Stingley in the hospital shortly after the hit, but Stingley's family turned him away. Later, when a meeting was proposed for a television segment, it fell through because Tatum allegedly wanted to use the meeting to promote his book, They Call Me Assassin.
Incident like this bothers you, but it's one of those things where you have to just keep playing and you try to work it out within yourself. And I think I reached the point where I finally worked it out, and I'm playing real good ball again for the Raiders, and been elected team captain. So all the young guys are looking to me for a little leadership. So I have to get back to playing real good ball, so I can't let it affect me anymore.
To the fans of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this is a complicated subject. We loved the violence, we loved the Soul Patrol, but the Stingley hit was a mirror that showed us the true cost of that violence. It was the moment the gladiator aspect of the NFL became too real for some to handle. After the 1978 season, the NFL was different. The league was watching the Raiders with a magnifying glass. Tatum played one more year in Oakland and then was traded to the Houston Oilers in 1980. In Houston, he still had the fire. He recorded a career-high 7 interceptions that year, proving that he wasn't just a thug, he was a highly skilled safety with elite ball skills. But the assassin label was now a weight around his neck. Every time he made a hard hit, the flags would fly. The league was evolving into a more offensive-friendly product, and men like Tatum were becoming relics of a past that the NFL wanted to forget. He retired after the 1980 season with 37 interceptions and 3 Pro Bowl appearances. By any statistical measure, he was one of the greatest defensive backs of his generation. But when the Hall of Fame discussions come up, his name is often met with silence. The Stingley factor is real. The voters in Canton have a difficult time rewarding a man whose name is synonymous with the most tragic injury in the sport's history. But is that fair? If we judge Tatum by the rules of today, he's a villain. If we judge him by the rules of 1976, he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer. This is the debate that still rages in sports bars and on message boards across the country. The end of Jack Tatum's life was a grim reflection of the violence he dealt out on the field. The man who had taken away the use of another man's legs found himself losing his own. Tatum suffered from severe diabetes, leading to the amputation of his left leg in 2003. There is a deep, poetic sadness in that. Tatum spent his final years in a wheelchair, the very same fate he had accidentally dealt to Darryl Stingley. When Stingley passed away in April 2007, he did so having never received the apology he wanted. When Tatum passed away 3 years later in 2010, he did so having never given it. He remained the assassin until the very end.
Everyone had to love Jack Tatum. The way he played, he gave us the brand of Ohio State defense.
He didn't back down. He didn't rewrite his history to fit a more politically correct narrative. He was a product of an era where football was war, and in war there are casualties. So where do we place Jack Tatum in the pantheon of NFL history? If you look at the stats, he's a legend. If you look at the championships, he's a winner. If you look at the impact he had on the game, he's one of the most influential players to ever wear a uniform. But if you look at the human cost, he is a cautionary tale. The NFL is a better game today because it is safer. We don't want to see young men in wheelchairs. We don't want to see careers ended in the preseason. But there is a part of every old school fan that misses the fear that Jack Tatum inspired. We miss the feeling that on any given Sunday you might see something truly legendary and truly dangerous. Jack Tatum was the most feared player in NFL history, not because he was the biggest or the fastest or the strongest. He was the most feared because he was the most willing. He was willing to go to a place that other players weren't. He was willing to be the villain. He was willing to be the assassin. And whether you love him or hate him, you cannot tell the story of the NFL without him. He is etched into the DNA of the league. He is the reason the rules are what they are today. He is the ghost that still haunts the middle of the field. So I ask you, the fans who saw him play, the fans who remember the 70s, is Jack Tatum a Hall of Famer? Does the assassin deserve his place in Canton? Or is the tragedy of Darryl Stingley too much to overcome? The NFL wants to forget Jack Tatum, but as long as there is film of number 32 patrolling the secondary, we never will. Because you can change the rules, you can change the equipment, and you can change the era. But you can never change the fact that for 1 decade in Oakland, Jack Tatum was the baddest man on the planet. We're losing the history of this game to the modern highlights. And on this channel, we make sure the legends and the assassins are never forgotten. Subscribe for more NFL legends. Leave a comment below with your favorite Jack Tatum memory. Did you see the Sammy White hit live? What did it feel like? Let's talk about real football in the comments. This is the history of the game we love. Thanks for watching.